In my family, there is a moment every woman over 70 is handed a piece of paper and told to sign. Sometimes it is dressed up as estate planning. Sometimes it is dressed up as love. Sometimes it arrives wrapped in the specific language of practicality, the language that says we are doing this for you. We are only thinking of you. This is just to make things easier, and the word easier does a great deal of work in that sentence. More work than it can hold. Because what it means when you strip the wrapping away is easier for us once you are no longer here to say otherwise. They slide it across a table, usually a table she paid for, in a house she maintained, in a neighborhood she chose before any of them were old enough to choose anything, and they watch her face for the calculation they assume is happening inside it. How much does she understand? How much can they afford for her to understand? They smile while they watch. The smiles are not always dishonest. That is the part that is hardest to explain to someone who has not sat on that side of the table. The smiles are often real. The worry is often real. The love is often real. In the particular, imperfect, insufficient way that love is real when it has been translated into logistics. This is the night I refused. Except that I did not refuse at all. I signed. That is the part they did not see coming, and neither, I suspect, did you. Let me tell you about a Tuesday in November. Not this past November. November of last year, when the days had gone short, and the light that came through my kitchen windows was the color of old paper, thin and apologetic, pressing in through the glass like it was embarrassed to arrive. I had made tea, the loose-leaf Assam my friend Doreen ships me from a woman she found online. Nothing you can get in a grocery store. Smoky and dense, in a way that takes the chill off a room just from the smell of it steeping. The steam rising in a slow curl while the leaves opened in the water. I had set out 4 cups, because I knew they were coming, and I still set out 4 cups, which tells you something about the kind of woman I am even at 71, still setting out cups, still making tea, still arranging things so that the people I love are comfortable in the moment before they try to take something from me. My name is Constance Adesi Okafor. I worked 31 years as a contracts administrator for the state of Ohio, and I want you to hold that detail in your mind, because it matters more than almost anything else I will tell you tonight. I reviewed procurement agreements. I caught the kinds of errors that look, at first reading, like typos, but which, when the contract is signed and the work begins, become a great deal of money, moving in the wrong direction. I developed, over 3 decades, a specific skill set. I read carefully. I ask what a document actually says, rather than what the person handing it to me says it says. And I have learned that those 2 things are often not the same thing. Not because people are liars, because people believe what they want to believe, and they write accordingly. When they sat down at my table, Emeka, my son, 39 years old and wearing a new watch his wife Tara had bought him for his birthday the previous month, a wide-faced thing with a silver band that he kept turning on his wrist, turning and turning, the way you turn something when you are managing something inside yourself. When they sat down, they had a folder, a manila folder, the kind you buy in bulk, and inside that folder was a document they called a family asset agreement. The document was 11 pages. I know, because I counted, the way I have always counted, but I am ahead of myself. Let me go back a little, not far, just to where the shape of this thing began. Emeka was not a cruel child. I want to say that plainly, right at the start of this, and I want you to believe it, because what I am about to tell you will make it very easy to decide that he was always rotten underneath, always calculating, always the kind of son who looked at his mother and saw an inventory, a balance sheet in human form, assets to be organized, accounts to be managed. That is not the truth, and I have made a commitment to the truth in this, even when the truth is less satisfying than the simpler story. He was a gentle boy. He had his father's forehead, the wide, smooth brow that photographs well, and that his daughter Lily has inherited, and his father's habit of going quiet when he was frightened, just pulling inward like a turtle, retreating into some interior room and shutting the door, and I recognized it every time it happened, and I always waited him out, because that is what you do when you know a person. His father, Charles Emmanuel Okafor, who died in the spring of 2019 of a second heart attack that should not have happened and did not have to happen, that was preceded by signs I saw, and that I asked him about, and that he dismissed in the particular way. He dismissed things that required him to stop doing what he was doing and pay attention to his body instead. Charles built the dining table we were sitting at that November night. White oak. He built it the spring of 2004, the year after Emika finished college, cut and sanded and joined it over 3 weekends in his brother's garage because the sawdust drove me out of the house, while Emika was supposed to be helping and instead mostly handed his father tools and talked about some girl he was seeing in Columbus, a woman named Adaora, who lasted 4 months and whom Emika now rarely mentions. Charles finished the table alone, the way he finished most things, stained it himself, 4 coats of a dark walnut stain. He spent 3 weeks selecting from sample cards. The last coat went on in July and dried in the heat and came out darker than he intended, and he stood in the garage looking at it for a long time, and then he shrugged and said, "Close enough." That was Charles. Close enough was sometimes very good. I still find fine white oak dust in the drawer of the sideboard sometimes, settled into the back corners, and I cannot bring myself to wipe it all the way out. That is the table Emeka slid the folder across. I want you to remember that. Now, Tara. Tara came into Emika's life when he was 32, and she was 28, and very certain of things. Certain in a way that only people who have had to fight for certainty are certain, which is to say, completely and somewhat fiercely. She grew up in Dayton in a house where the heat got turned off in January twice, and money was a weight you felt even when it wasn't directly discussed, the kind of financial precariousness that teaches you, early and thoroughly, that there is safety in having things organized and documented and named. She is not a villain. I will say that too right at the start, because she is more interesting than a villain, and because what she did was so much more understandable than villainy, which makes it, in some ways, worse. She is a woman who decided at a young age that financial clarity was a form of love, and she is not wrong about that exactly. She's just wrong about what it looks like when it is applied to people instead of accounts. When she married Emeka, she married a man with a mother who owned a house outright and held investments and had managed a career and made decisions for herself for 70 years. And what Tara saw when she looked at that was an unmanaged variable, a loose end. Not because she was malicious, but because she had been trained, by her own hard history, to see loose ends as dangers. And I understand that. I understand it genuinely, with both the empathy and the cool recognition that understanding a thing does not mean I am required to let it be done to me. She has a specific way of doing her hair, very straight, blown out smooth, even in humidity. And I noticed that night that there was a gray hair, just one, at her left temple, and that she had not colored over it yet. That detail caught my attention. Tara does not leave gray hairs unaddressed. She is someone who addresses things. The fact that she had missed this one told me she had been distracted or stressed, or both, and I filed that away the way I file things. She drafted the 11 pages. I knew that before she told me. The language had her fingerprints all over it, precise, airtight in intent, if not in execution, constructed with the confidence of someone who understands financial documents generally, but not specifically. What happens when the assets described in a financial document are no longer where they are described as being? But I am getting ahead of myself again. Let me tell you how the evening actually moved. They arrived at 6:15. I had said dinner at 6:30, but they came early the way people come early when they have decided something and do not want to spend too long sitting with the decision before they deliver it. There is a specific kind of punctuality that is really impatience wearing a polite coat, and that is what arrived at my door at 6:15 on a Tuesday in November. I heard the car door, then footsteps on the porch, then the bell. Emeka hugged me at the door, the real kind, pressing in with real warmth, his arms coming all the way around, and the wool of his jacket smelled like cold air and something woodsy. Cedar, I think, from whatever Tara buys at that store in Bexley that she has been recommending to me for 4 years. And for just a moment, in that hug, he was the boy who used to press his face into my shoulder when something frightened him, when a nightmare had woken him, and he had come padding down the hall to find me in the kitchen drinking tea at 2 in the morning, because I have always been someone who gets up. That moment lasted the length of a breath. Then he pulled back and he smiled, and the smile was genuine, but it had a quality that I recognized from work, the smile of someone who has a meeting about to start. "You look good, Mom," he said. "I know," I said. He laughed. He thought I was joking. Tara hugged me too, briefly, her arms light around my shoulders. She smelled like something clean and expensive. She was wearing good earrings, small and gold. She said my house looked nice, and she meant it. She has always had a genuine appreciation for my house, for the way I keep it, and I think it is because she grew up without a house that was kept in a way anyone could take pride in, and she recognizes care when she sees it, even when she is doing something that contradicts her appreciation for it. We had dinner first. I had made jollof rice the way my mother made it, with the smoky bottom crust that takes patience and a specific, low, unvarying heat that you learn by feel and cannot write down, the kind of knowledge that lives in your hands and in your nose rather than in any recipe. I had made fried plantains, ripe ones, dark at the edges, sweet all the way through, and I had made a chicken stew with a tomato base that had been on the stove since noon, the kind of stew that fills the whole house, that you can smell from the driveway when you arrive. That is its own kind of welcome, even when the welcome has complications underneath it. Tara ate carefully, the way she always does. Small portions arranged so they do not touch each other on the plate. Not rudeness, just the particular relationship she has with food, which is her own business. Emeka ate everything I put in front of him and then took more plantains without asking, just reaching and serving himself and eating them, while he talked, the way he has done since he was 7 years old, and which I have never corrected because some things are correct as they are. We talked about the twins. Marcus and Lily, 7 years old, in 2nd grade, at a school in Upper Arlington that Tara had researched extensively before they moved to that district. Marcus had recently developed an opinion about dinosaurs, specifically about the question of whether certain theropod classifications needed to be revised in light of recent fossil evidence from Montana, which is a sentence I am telling you my 7-year-old grandson had recently become conversational on. Emeka described this for 11 minutes. Not approximately 11 minutes. I watched the kitchen clock. 11 minutes of Marcus and the theropods, delivered with the enthusiasm of a man who could not quite believe how interesting his son was, and wanted everyone in the room to share in the astonishment. He had his father's quality of assuming everyone in the room shared his enthusiasms, and it was his best quality, I think, and also the most exhausting one. I let him go. I asked about the specific bone in question. I listened to the answer, which Emeka delivered accurately and with genuine excitement. Lily, he reported, had recently decided she wanted to be an engineer, though the type of engineering changed depending on the week. This week it was bridges. Last week it had been rockets. The week before that it had been, for reasons neither Emeka nor Tara had fully been able to trace, a bridge that was also a rocket. I told Emeka that Lily was going to be fine. He agreed. After the plates were cleared, after I brought out the small almond cookies I buy from the Somali bakery on 5th, that Tara always says she really shouldn't eat, and then eats 3 of without particular guilt, after the conversation had done a lap around the weather, and another lap around Emeka's work, and a brief stop at a cousin's upcoming wedding in Atlanta. After all of that, the rhythm of the evening changed. It did not change dramatically. It was not loud. It was the way a tide changes, which is to say you look up, and the water is somewhere different from where it was, and you cannot point to exactly when it moved. Emeka set his hands flat on the table. His father's table. The white oak table. He set his hands flat and looked at me with the expression of a man who has rehearsed something and is now performing it, and the performance is not dishonest, but it is also not entirely his own. Someone else helped him write the lines. "Mom," he said, "we wanted to talk to you about the estate." The word estate sat in the room for a moment. It is a word that does a specific kind of work. It takes a life, a full, particular, ongoing life, with a smell and a temperature and specific knowledge that cannot be written down, a life with a white oak table and a drawer full of dust and 40 years of habit. And it translates it into a column on a ledger. I do not object to ledgers. I have spent 31 years working with them, but I notice when a life is being translated. All right, I said. Tara reached into the bag she had brought, a leather tote, dark green, the kind with brass feet on the bottom that protect the leather when you set it down, a bag that costs what it costs and is worth it for what it lasts. And she produced the manila folder. She placed it on the table between us and slid it, slowly toward me, the way a dealer pushes chips across a felt table, measured, deliberate. We had an attorney draw this up, she said, a family asset agreement. It just clarifies the structure of things, who has authority over what, in case something happens, what the plan is. She paused. It's really just tidying up. Tidying up. I looked at the folder. Can I ask, I said, which attorney? Amika's hands moved slightly on the table, a small shift, just a fraction. Someone Tara works with, he said. At her firm? I said. He does a lot of estate work, Tara said smoothly. Family estate work. He's been doing this for 20 years. Very thorough. She said this with the confidence of someone who has already pre-addressed the objection, who anticipated that I might ask about the source and prepared an answer that would close the question. 20 years is a long time. He is thorough. There is nothing to worry about. I nodded. I opened the folder. Now. I want to step back from that table for a moment, from that kitchen in that house on Ashford Road, from those 4 cups and the smoky smell of Assam and the almond cookies, and my son's watch turning on his wrist. I want to step back and speak to you directly, whoever you are watching this. Some of you already know where this story is going. Some of you have been handed a version of this folder yourself. Some of you are watching because your mother was handed one, and you watched what it did to her, and you are here because you want to understand the way out. So let me tell you the thing I have not told you yet. The thing I knew when I sat down to dinner and poured the tea and set out 4 cups. The thing I have known for 2 years. I knew the folder was coming. Not this exact folder, not the 11 pages or the specific language or the attorney's name, but the shape of the thing, the intention underneath it. I had known the way you know a storm is building when you live in a place long enough, not because the sky tells you suddenly, but because you have learned to read the smaller signs, the particular quality of the air in the afternoon, the way certain birds go quiet a day before the rain, the way the light sits differently on the lawn. The signs had been accumulating for at least 2 years. The Christmas before last, Amika asked over breakfast, about the investment accounts and what he presented as idle curiosity. Just wondering how things were organized, Mom. Just wondering what kind of accounts they were, whether there was a beneficiary set up, whether I had thought about all of that. The questions were casual in the way that only very deliberate things can be casual. I answered some of them and deflected others, and I watched him absorb the information with a small nod, the nod of a man filing things away. Then there were the phone calls with Tara. Perhaps twice a month we talked. She always called, which I had always appreciated. And into those calls, beginning that same winter, she began inserting small references, not heavy-handed, not obvious, just small. A woman she knew whose elderly mother had not had her affairs in order. The difficulty this had caused, the confusion, the legal complications. Wasn't it better to be prepared? Wasn't it better to have things clear? She never said anything that could be objected to. She is too careful for that. But I am also careful, and I heard what was being built inside those conversations, the way you hear a frame going up inside walls. You cannot see yet. I heard it. I thought about it. And then I did what I had always done in 31 years of work, when I looked at a situation and saw where it was heading. I got my documents in order first. Let me tell you about Patricia. Patricia Adeyemi has a law office on the east side of Columbus, on a block that does not look like the kind of block that contains what it contains. A woman who can read a problem from 3 angles at once and tell you, without flourish, exactly what it is and what it will cost you to fix it and what it will cost you not to. I had known Patricia since before Amika was born, when she did immigration work for my family, when I was a young woman with a different name and a different apartment and a different set of worries, and she helped me navigate a particular bureaucratic thicket with the same dry precision she still brings to everything she touches. We had not been in regular contact for years. A Christmas card, an occasional email, the particular low-maintenance friendship that sustains itself on shared history. But I knew her well enough to call her on a Wednesday morning and tell her what I thought was happening. I called her on the first Wednesday of March. 2 years before that November dinner. I made the call from my kitchen, standing at the counter, looking out at the yard where Charles had put in a raised garden bed in 2016 that I had converted from vegetables to peonies after he died, because I cannot grow tomatoes without him, and I refuse to grow bad ones. The peonies were not up yet that March, just the bare dirt and the painted boards of the bed. I looked at that, and I told Patricia what I had been observing, calmly, in order, the way you present findings when you want someone to take them seriously. Patricia listened, without interrupting. That is the first thing about her that I have always trusted. She does not interrupt. She lets you finish. When I finished, the line was quiet for a moment. "What do you want to protect?" she said. "And how permanent do you want the protection to be?" I told her. I had thought about it enough by then that the answer was ready. The work took 2 meetings and 6 weeks of documentation. Patricia drafted and I reviewed, which is what you do when you are a contracts administrator, even in retirement. You review always, everything, even when it is a document being written on your behalf, especially then. We went over it 3 times. Patricia sent me the draft. I read it in the evenings at Charles's table with a cup of tea and the reading glasses I have been wearing since I was 53, and I made notes in the margins in green pen, the same green pen I used for 31 years of contract review. And I sent it back with questions, and Patricia answered the questions, and we went through it again. What Patricia built, at my direction, was a revocable, living trust, the Constance A. Okafor Trust, dated the 14th of April. Into this trust I transferred the house on Ashford Road, my house, purchased in 1991 in my name, before my marriage, from my own savings, money I had earned and kept and put away, with the specific intention of having something that was mine, regardless of what happened next. I transferred the investment accounts at Merrill Lynch. I transferred the money market account, and I closed the joint brokerage account that Charles and I had opened in 2001. The one Emeka knew about, the one his father had mentioned to him over dinner one Sunday, in the loose, generous way that Charles mentioned things he was proud of. I closed it in February of the following year, because Charles's name had been off it since his death anyway, and its assets went into the trust, along with everything else. The trust named me as the sole trustee during my lifetime. I could revoke it, amend it, change it at any time for any reason because it was mine. It was always mine. That is the only thing I wanted it to be. Its successor trustee, the person who would take over upon my death or genuine incapacity, was Patricia, not Emeka, not Tara. Patricia, with a specific mandate, a distribution schedule, and instructions that were clear enough that a court could read them without any assistance from my family. The distribution itself was fair. I will tell you that plainly, because I want you to understand. I did not cut my son out. I was never trying to cut my son out. Emeka and the twins would receive their portions, at the time and in the manner I specified. The twins' portions go into a subtrust that holds until they are 25 and disperses in stages, because I have watched what early inheritance does to young people, and I did not want that for Marcus or for Lily. Emeka's portion comes to him outright, without conditions, without management requirements. The only thing Emeka does not receive is the ability to reach in before the time comes. That was the whole of it. That was all I protected. Not the money, my time. And when the family asset agreement arrived, when Tara's attorney drafted those 11 pages and named the investment accounts at Merrill Lynch, and the money market, and the brokerage account, and the house on Ashford Road, he was naming things that were no longer there. Not in the form he described, not under the ownership structure he described, not in a way that a co-signatory requirement could reach, because you cannot make someone a co-signer on a trust account by having the grantor sign a separate piece of paper at a dinner table. That is not how trusts work. That is not how any of this works. The attorney Tara worked with did not ask the right questions. He asked the questions that got him to 11 pages. He did not ask the one question that would have changed everything. Has the structure of her assets changed recently? It had, 18 months before he wrote a single word. But I was not ready that November evening to explain any of this to anyone. I was still reading. I was at the kitchen table with my cold tea and the manila folder, and 11 pages of a document that described a life I used to have, organized the way I used to have it, before I quietly moved everything to somewhere they could not follow. I read all 11 pages. Amika and Tara waited. They had a particular way of waiting together that I had observed over the years. Him with his hand still on the table and his eyes on my face, reading me the way you read a weather forecast, looking for the sign that tells you what is coming, and her with her phone face down beside her, not touching it, which for Tara is a gesture of enormous patience, because Tara is not someone who leaves her phone alone. She was giving this her full attention. She believed it deserved it. The kitchen clock made its soft ticking sound. The refrigerator hummed, a low, steady note. At some point my tea went cold, and I did not reach for it. The cookies sat between us, and no one took one. The document was well drafted. I will give Tara that without hesitation. The language was clean, the structure was logical, and whoever had assembled it had done so with a genuine understanding of estate documents as a category. The specific clauses on co-signatory authority were tight. The incapacity provision on page 9 was written carefully enough that it would hold up if challenged. The family property preservation structure on page 7, the one that would have placed my house in an entity Emeka effectively controlled, was clever. Not clever enough, but clever. The co-signatory authority covered the Merrill Lynch accounts and the money market. Effective upon my signature. Any transaction above $5,000 would require Emeka's approval. $5,000. I have signed contracts worth $400 million, combined, over a career. I have negotiated terms on construction projects and technology procurements and facility management agreements, and the floor on the amounts involved was almost never below 6 figures, and the work of ensuring those contracts were right, properly scoped, properly protected, properly structured, was work I did, with more precision than most people in most rooms had any expectation of, and they were asking me to need my son's permission to spend $5,000 of my own money. I set that aside. Not because it did not sting, because I did not have time for stinging. I went to page 7, the house on Ashford Road. My house, the house I had chosen in 1991 by driving the neighborhood 3 times, on 3 different days, at 3 different times of day to see who was there, and what the light did, and whether the block had the quality I was looking for, which I could not fully articulate, but which I knew when I found it. I bought it 6 months before I married Charles, with my money in my name, because I had grown up watching women lose their housing when marriages ended, and I was not willing to be that woman. And Charles, who was a good man, who understood certain things completely and others not at all, but who was always trying. Charles had not been threatened by this. He had moved in and built a table and put up a garden bed and changed light bulbs and fixed the drainage issue on the south side of the foundation and made that house his in the ways he could. And it was his. It always was. Even though the deed was mine, the document would have placed that house in the Family Property Preservation Trust. Emeka's effective control, his authority to manage it, lease it, or make decisions about its eventual sale in the event that a licensed physician and a family representative, named in the document as Amika, determined I was unable to make sound financial decisions. So Emeka would decide whether Amika should have control. That is a logical structure, if you do not look at it carefully. If you look at it carefully, it is a closed loop that points only in one direction, and that direction is his. I turned to page 9. I read the liquid assets clause. I read it twice, and then I set the document down, squarely, in front of me. This clause, on page 9, I said, the one about liquid assets. That just covers the brokerage accounts, Tara said. Her voice was even and sure. She had prepared for questions. She was prepared for this one. The Merrill Lynch accounts, I said. Right, she said. And the money market. It's just to make sure there's continuity of management in case there's ever a situation where, in case I lose my mind, I said pleasantly. A pause, a very brief one. In case of incapacity, Tara said carefully. Of any kind. A breath. It's standard language, Constance. It's really just protective. I looked up from the document then. I looked at my son. He was looking at the table, at the white oak table his father built in the spring of 2004 in his uncle's garage over 3 weekends, while Emeka handed him tools and talked about a girl. He was looking at the table, and his jaw was set, and there was something in the set of it that I recognized, a particular quality of determination, holding down something else underneath, something that was not determination at all. "Amika," I said. He looked up. "This is what you want?" I said. He held my eyes for 3 seconds. Not approximately. 3. I counted them. "It's just about being prepared, Mom," he said. "We worry about you. You're alone in this house, and we just worry. Worry about you." I have thought about that phrase many times since November. I have turned it over the way you turn a stone and look at what lies underneath, and what I keep finding is this. He was not lying. He does worry. He has worried since his father died, in the particular guilty way that children worry about a surviving parent when they cannot be present as often as they feel they should be. The worry that is partly love and partly the relief of outsourcing your love to a legal document so that you can feel you have done something concrete instead of just feeling helpless in the face of ordinary, irreversible time. He worried about me, and his worry had been shaped over 2 years of dinners and conversations and a green leather bag full of carefully drafted language into a form that served something in addition to love. That is what I keep coming back to. Not that the love was absent, that it had been organized. "I know," I said. I picked up the document again. I turned to the signature page. "Do you have a pen?" I asked. The silence that followed that question was a particular kind. The kind where two people who were expecting a longer scene suddenly find themselves at the end of it. Tara reached into the green leather tote. She produced a pen, a heavy one, silver, the kind that sits in your hand with weight, that does not scratch, but moves across paper with a smoothness that feels like what confidence is supposed to feel like. She set it on the table and slid it toward me. I picked it up. I signed on the signature line on page 11. In the full version of my name as I have written it since 1981. Not a small signature, not an uncertain one. Constance Adeji Okafor, clear and complete. The same signature I had put on $400 million of state contracts. The same signature that had been notarized and witnessed and filed and entered into record more times than I could count. I set the pen down. I closed the folder. I looked at them both. "There you are," I said. Amika exhaled. It was a long breath, the kind you release when you have been holding something. He looked at Tara, and there was something in that look that I had not expected. Relief, yes, but underneath it something more complicated, something that looked, if I was reading it correctly, like guilt. The guilt of a person who has received something and is not entirely certain they deserved it. He covered it quickly. He is practiced at that particular covering. But I saw it, and I filed it away, and I have thought about it many times since. Tara picked up the folder. She checked the signature. She put it back in her bag with the efficiency of someone completing a task, and she smiled at me, and the smile was warm. Not performed warm, not strategic warm. Actually warm, in the way that Tara can be warm when she stops managing a situation long enough to simply be in it. She had been afraid, I think, of a scene, of refusal, of a rupture at the table that would require months of careful repair. She did not want damage. She had wanted the paper, and she wanted everyone to be fine, and she had convinced herself, in the way that people convince themselves of convenient things, that getting the paper would allow everyone to be fine. She got the paper. "Thank you, Constance," she said. "Would you like more tea?" I asked. We stayed at that table another 40 minutes. We talked about the twins, about Marcus and the theropods, about Lily's engineering ambitions. Amika told me about a trip they were considering for the following summer, somewhere on the coast of Maine, a place he had read about that rented houses by the week. He showed me a photo on his phone, a white house on a cliff above the ocean. The kind of house that looks like it has been there for 100 years and knows it. He looked happy describing it. Not performed happy. The real kind, the kind that slips out when a person is talking about something they actually want. "You could come for part of it," he said. "If you wanted." "Maybe," I said. I walked them to the door. Amika hugged me at the threshold, a long hug, longer than when he arrived, and the cedar smell of his jacket was the same. And his arms around me felt like something familiar, like a thing I had built and recognized. He did not want to pull away, I noticed. He held on the extra beat. "Love you, Mom," he said. I know, I said. He pulled back. He looked at me for a moment. This time he did not think I was joking. They drove away in Tara's gray Lexus. I watched the taillights go red at the corner of Ashford and Millbrook, and then disappear. The night was cold and unusually clear, the kind of clear you get in November when the air has that particular dryness that scrubs the sky down to something you can actually see. Stars. I could see actual stars, which you rarely can from the city unless the conditions are exactly right. I stood on my porch in the cold for a few minutes, the concrete step under my slippered feet, the chill coming off the yard, a neighbor's television audible through their front window. Thin sound, distant, the murmur of someone else's evening, and then the click of my deadbolt when I went back inside. I poured my cold tea down the drain. The sound of it, the liquid spiral, the low rush, the drain's short gulp. I filled the kettle. I listened to it heat. I made a fresh cup and I sat at Charles's table and I looked at the 4 cups I had set out earlier, 3 of them untouched and 1 empty, and at the small round marks the cups had left on the wood, the faint circles of warmth on the surface of the table. I did not call Patricia that night. I sat at the table for a while. The house was very quiet, the way houses are quiet when you have lived in them, long enough that the quiet has a specific character. Not the absence of sound, but the accumulation of all the sounds that have happened in a place, and then stopped. The table, the drawer in the sideboard with the dust, the peonies outside the kitchen window, dormant now, nothing visible above the soil, their whole lives hidden underground until spring. I went to bed at 10. I lay in the dark and listened to the furnace cycle on, the click, then the low rush of air through old vents, then the particular smell of heat, moving through a house that has been standing since 1974, warm and dusty and oddly comforting, like something the house is telling you about itself. I was asleep by 10:30. In the morning, I called Patricia at 9. She answered on the second ring. They used it, I said. Did you sign? She said. I did. A brief silence. Not surprise. Patricia does not produce surprise. She produces attention, which is different and more useful. Everything goes forward as structured, she said. Yes, I said. Do you want to tell Emeka now, or wait for the attorney to figure it out? I looked out at the garden bed, the bare November soil, the painted boards, the peonies below the surface waiting for March or April, whenever the cold decided to loosen its grip. Not yet, I said. Let it sit. All right, Patricia said. How long before his attorney figures it out? When they try to implement the agreement, she said. When they go to transfer the co-signatory structure to Merrill Lynch, they'll find out the accounts aren't in your name the way the document describes. The bank will tell them, or his attorney will look closer and call me. And you'll tell him the truth, I said. I'll tell him the truth, she said. That the assets were restructured into a trust prior to the agreement's execution, that the restructuring was lawful, documented, and final, and that there is nothing in the family asset agreement that reaches the trust. Good, I said. Constance, Patricia said, are you all right? I thought about that. I will be, I said. That's not the same as yes. She understood the distinction. That was why I had called her. Let me tell you about the 2 months between November and what happened in January. Nothing dramatic occurred in the way you might expect. No confrontations, no letters from attorneys, not yet. No phone calls in which anyone raised their voice. What happened was quieter than that and, in its own way, heavier. Emeka called every Sunday. He has called every Sunday since his father died, without missing one, and I have come to organize my Sundays around that call the way you organize a day, around a meal or a weather event. It is simply part of the structure, of the week, and you would notice its absence immediately if it failed to appear. Those Sundays were the same Sundays they had always been. He told me about the twins. He told me about work. He complained about the cold in a way that made me suspect he had forgotten that I lived in the same climate. He asked about my knee, which I had been managing with physical therapy since October, and I told him it was better, because it was. He sounded like my son. He was my son, and I was holding something back, not performing normality exactly. What I held back was something specific and bounded, but holding something nonetheless. Maintaining a gap, being in 2 conversations simultaneously, the one we were having and the one we would eventually have to have, and not yet collapsing them into one. That is its own kind of work. It is tiring work. I do not recommend it when there is an alternative, but I had decided on the timeline, and I kept to it, which is, I suppose, very like me. Tara called once, in December, about the twins' Christmas list. She was warm that day, easy, the version of Tara that appears when she is not managing anything. We talked for 20 minutes about what 7-year-olds want for Christmas and what they actually need, and the interesting question of whether those two things can ever fully overlap. She made me laugh once, a real laugh, about something Marcus had said to his teacher that I will not repeat because it reflects poorly on Amika's supervision during certain television viewing hours. I laughed and she laughed, and we were, for 20 minutes, simply two women who knew the same people and found them funny. I sent the twins books. I always send books, which is a thing they have both come to expect from me, and which I have no intention of stopping even when they protest. Marcus got a children's encyclopedia of prehistoric animals, not a picture book, a real reference, with correct taxonomic information and full-page illustrations detailed enough to be scientifically useful. I ordered it in November when he first got into the theropods. Lily got a biography of Elsie McGill, the first woman in North America to earn an aeronautical engineering degree, 1927, a woman who went on to design fighter aircraft during the war, and who was so uninterested in the limits other people placed on her that she apparently never noticed them. I found the biography at a used bookshop on High Street that I go to on the first Saturday of every month. It was in a corner shelf that I almost did not check. The copy I found had a name written in pencil on the inside cover. Margaret, 1968. Margaret had read this book in 1968 and then let it go, and now it was going to Lily. I liked that. I liked the invisible thread of it. The attorney's letter arrived in January. Not to me. To Patricia. He used the word discrepancy, which I found revealing. Not in the letter itself. The letter was professionally neutral. The kind of letter that has been carefully drained of any implication before it was sent. But in the word choice. Discrepancy implies error. It implies that something is off by accident, that a number was transposed, that a form was filled out incorrectly, that the situation simply needs to be clarified and corrected, and everything will proceed as expected. Discrepancy is the word of a man who has not yet understood what he is looking at. Patricia called me the afternoon she received it. "They've found it," she said. "I know," I said. "How do you want to play this?" "I don't play things," I said. Patricia's exhale, barely a sound, more of a release, the closest she gets to a laugh in a professional context. "What do you want me to say to him, Ainsu?" She said. "The truth," I said. "Everything he's looking for is in the trust. Everything has been in the trust for 18 months. The agreement they had Constance sign describes assets that were restructured prior to the agreement's creation, and the restructuring was lawful, documented, and final. He can call me directly if he'd like to discuss it." "He may prefer not to," Patricia said. "That's his choice, Gwynsu," I said. "The offer stands." He did not call. What happened instead was that Emeka called, not on Sunday, on a Wednesday afternoon, 2.5 weeks after Patricia received the attorney's letter. I was at the kitchen table with a crossword and a cup of tea and a quiet afternoon, which is what Wednesday afternoons are when the weather does not give you anything better to do. The kind of afternoon where the house settles into itself and you settle into the house, and the only sounds are the ones the building makes on its own. Small adjustments, wood, talking to itself. My phone rang. Amika. I looked at it for one ring. Then I answered. "Mom." His voice was different from Sunday's, tighter, the voice of someone who has been handed an explanation they do not yet fully understand and is calling the person who can explain it. "Mom, I talked to Tara's lawyer." "I know," I said. A pause. "The accounts," he started. "The house. He's saying they're in my trust," I said. "Yes." Silence. "When did you?" "April of the year before last," I said. 18 months before your dinner." Another silence. Longer. I could hear his office in the background, a phone ringing distantly, the ambient sound of a building's ventilation, the specific white noise of a life being lived away from home. "The brokerage account," he said slowly. "The one Dad. Closed in February," I said. "The assets moved into the trust. There was nothing left in it that the agreement could reach. The silence went long enough that I set down my pen on the crossword and waited. "Mom," he said, "why didn't you tell me?" And there it was, that question, the one I had been carrying since November, the one I had known was coming, and had not been entirely sure, even after all the preparation, how I would answer. I looked out the window at the garden bed. February. The peonies still underground, the soil bare, the painted boards of the raised bed Charles had put in 7 years ago, white paint with a small streak of green that happened when Amika was helping one summer and tilted the wrong can. Charles had left the streak. He said it gave it character. "Amika," I said, "you had an attorney draft a document that would have given you control of my accounts and my house. You brought it to dinner and called it tidying up. You did not ask me first. You did not tell me what was coming. You made a decision about my affairs and then brought it to me to sign. Nothing from him." "I didn't do what I did because I don't love you," I said. "I did it because I have been doing this kind of work for 31 years, and I know what a document says before I sign it. I know what it means when the assets it describes are described incorrectly." "Mom?" "I'm not finished," I said. He stopped. "You are going to receive exactly what I always intended you to receive. Nothing has changed in terms of what is yours. Eventually, what has changed is the question of who controls it until then. That person is me. It has always been me, and it will remain me for as long as I am here to be me." A long pause. "Did you know at dinner?" he said. "When we came, when you already knew." "Yes," I said. "You signed it anyway." "I did." "Why?" he said, and his voice had something in it now that surprised me, something I had not heard in it before. Not anger exactly, though there was some of that, but a kind of bewilderment, the sound of a person who thought they knew the terrain and has discovered that they were looking at a map that described somewhere else. If you already knew, why sign it? "Because it described things that were no longer there," I said. "Signing it cost me nothing." Silence. "And I suppose," I said more quietly, "because I wanted you to understand something about what you were asking me to do, about what that document actually said." "Mom." His voice was rough now, rougher than I had heard it in a long time. I thought I was helping." "I know you thought that," I said. "Tara thought it was. She thought you needed." "I know what Tara thought," I said. "Tara thought I needed managing, and she is a woman I like and who loves my son and who grew up without stability and is terrified of what happens when stability is not formally structured. I understand all of that. That doesn't mean she was right." A very long pause. "I didn't think you'd—" He started. He stopped. He tried again. "I didn't think of you that way, Mom. I wasn't trying to say you couldn't." "The document said I couldn't," I said. "Documents mean what they say." He was quiet for a while. "Your father would have told me," he said finally, quietly. "He would have just called and said what he was doing." I thought about that. I looked at the garden bed, the bare soil, Charles's streak of green paint on the white board. Somewhere under that soil the peonies were waiting, doing what they did in the cold, which is simply exist and be ready. "Your father," I said, "built that table in your uncle's garage over 3 weekends and never once mentioned he was doing it. He just built it and carried it in and set it down in the dining room. That was also your father." Amika made a sound, not a laugh, something in the same neighborhood. "I love that table," he said. "I know," I said. "So do I." We stayed on the phone a few minutes more. We did not resolve everything. I did not expect to. These things do not resolve in the space of a single phone call, any more than they develop in one. And what was between us now was not a problem to be solved in an afternoon, but a shift in understanding that would take time to settle into something stable, something we could both stand on. I told him we would talk more. He said yes. He said he was sorry, briefly, awkwardly, in the way of men who are not practiced at saying it, but are trying. I acknowledged it and did not let it go on too long. We hung up. I sat at the table for a while. The crossword was open in front of me, half done. I picked up the pen and looked at it and set it down again. The thing I keep returning to, when I go back to that Wednesday in my mind, is the question Amika asked and what I said in answer. Because the honest answer is more complicated than the one I gave. The honest answer has two parts. One part is the one I told him. The document described things that were no longer there, so signing it cost me nothing. And I wanted him to learn what he had been asking for. That is true. The other part is the part I have not said out loud to anyone until this. I had built the trust, carefully and completely, over 2 years. I had known that the folder was coming in some form. I'd made sure that when it came it would land on nothing. All of that was true. All of that was intentional, and I stand by every choice in it. But there was one choice I made that I cannot fully defend. I did not tell Emeka what I was doing when I did it. I chose not to tell him, and the reason I have told myself, the one I have repeated when I reviewed the decision, was that I was not certain he could be trusted with the information before the structure was complete, that he might have moved earlier, might have preempted the trust with some other approach, and I could not take that risk. That is partly true, but it is not the whole truth. The whole truth is that I wanted the scene at the table, the folder sliding across the white oak, the pen, the signature, the moment when they would try to implement the agreement and find only the shape of something that was no longer there. I wanted the moment of understanding that would come from that, the moment that could not be explained away or softened or reframed as a misunderstanding. I wanted it to be clear, undeniable, and felt. That is a human thing. It is not my best thing, and it cost me something. It cost me the version of this where I told my son, in the spring of that year, that I was protecting myself and why, and he had the chance to understand it in the beginning. Not at the end, where we could have had a harder conversation earlier and avoided the 11 pages and the November dinner and the January phone call entirely, where he might have said, listening to me, I see what we were building toward and I'm sorry, and we could have grieved it together and come out on the other side of it sooner. Instead, what I gave him was a lesson. Lessons land, but they land differently than conversations. A conversation is something you can be part of. A lesson is something done to you. I chose the lesson. And I am not, even now, entirely sure I was wrong. But I am not entirely sure I was right either. And that uncertainty is something I live with, the way you live with an old scar. Not painful anymore, not something that keeps you from doing what you need to do, but present, detectable, when the weather changes. Tara called me herself, about 3 weeks after my call with Emeka. I had not known whether she would, and when I saw her name on the phone, I felt a small adjustment somewhere in my chest, a slight surprise I did not name at the time. She called on a Saturday morning when I was in the kitchen, and the light was coming in at a low winter angle, the kind that lights the bottom of things, the baseboards and the floor, while the ceiling stays dim. I answered. I wanted to call, she said. A pause. I've been thinking about what Emeka told me, about the trust, about when you set it up. All right, I said. I want to be honest with you, she said. I thought I was doing something practical. I thought it was... She stopped, started again. I made assumptions about what you needed, and I think I did it without asking you, which was... She stopped again. I miscalculated what that looked like from where you were sitting. Not an apology, exactly, but more than most people manage. I know what you were trying to do, I said. I understand why. That's different from agreeing with it. Yes, she said quietly. I'm starting to understand that. We talked for an hour, about Emeka, about the twins, about what she had understood and what she hadn't. At one point, she said with a kind of rueful directness that I genuinely respected, I treated your affairs like a project. You did, I said. I'm sorry, she said. Those 2 words, Tara saying them directly, is not a small thing. I received them as what they were. I know, I said, and I meant it as something softer than I had meant it in November, something closer to acknowledgement than to deflection. Thank you for calling. It has been 14 months since that November dinner. The Sundays are still Sundays. Emeka calling. The twins' news delivered in whatever order they decide it matters. The ordinary current of a family's ordinary life moving through a phone on a winter afternoon. Marcus has expanded his paleontological interests to include the Cretaceous period generally. Lily has moved from bridges to electrical engineering after watching a documentary about the first women who programmed the ENIAC computer in 1945, and she called me specifically to tell me about it, which was Lily calling me on her own, of her own decision, and which I found myself thinking about for days afterward, with a warmth I could not entirely account for. The house on Ashford Road is still mine. The trust is still in place, precisely as Patricia and I designed it. Nothing in the legal structure has changed, and I have no plans to change any of it. The Constance A. Okafor Trust, dated the 14th of April, is a complete and lawful document, and it will continue to do what I built it to do, which is to be the instrument of my own intentions, rather than anyone else's. I spoke with Patricia last month, a routine check-in. She asked how things were with Emeka. I told her things were improving slowly, which is the truest description I can give. Slowly is not a small thing. Slowly means movement. Slowly means neither of us has given up. I put Lily's drawing on the refrigerator, the flying bridge, the bridge rocket, a drawing in purple crayon, confident lines, her name in the bottom right corner in letters that are getting more consistent each time I see them. Below the drawing, on the refrigerator door, there is a photograph I have kept for 11 years, held there by a magnet shaped like Lake Erie. The photograph is of Charles and Emeka at the dining table, Charles's table, at Thanksgiving of that year, both of them eating and not looking at the camera, talking to each other, Charles. Mid-sentence with his fork held loosely, Emeka laughing at something his father said, Charles's forehead, Emeka's forehead, the same. I look at that photograph sometimes when I am standing at the refrigerator, thinking about something else. I do not plan to look at it. I just find myself looking. There is a kind of winning that does not feel the way you expected winning to feel. I had spent 2 years building something airtight and specific. I had watched it work exactly as designed. The paper they brought me described a life I had already moved beyond their reach, and I had signed it calmly and completely, and then watched the understanding arrive in stages, the way a tide arrives, gradually, and then completely. I had been right. I had been prepared. I had been, professionally speaking, correct. And I had also lost something I did not name until it was already gone. The illusion, maybe, is the right word for it. The illusion that my son understood what I was. Not fully. I was never asking for full understanding. No one gets that, not completely, but sufficiently. That he knew, on some level, what 31 years of contract work looks like when it is sitting across a table from you at dinner, what it means to be a woman who has been reading fine print since before you were born. I had believed he knew this, at some level, without thinking about it, and the November folder told me that he did not, that he had looked at his mother and seen someone in need of managing. Losing an illusion is not the same as losing a fact. I know that. The illusion was not real in the first place, but it held something that I had not examined closely because I had not needed to, and when it was gone, the space it left was cold and specific, the way a draft is specific, the way you know exactly which window is open by the particular direction of the chill. I am not angry. That is the thing that surprises me most when I check. I have checked many times. I expected, going into that November dinner and coming out of it, to find anger. Righteous anger, even. The clean, bracing kind. Instead, what I find is something more like sorrow, the kind of sorrow that does not prevent you from getting up and making tea and going about your Wednesday, but that is there when you sit still long enough to notice it. I have been careful in how I say what I'm about to say. I have thought about it for 14 months, and what I believe is this. I protected what I had built, completely and correctly, and with every skill I have. Nothing was taken, nothing was lost. The house is mine, the trust is mine, my time is mine, my autonomy is mine, and they will remain mine for the length of my remaining life. And when that life is complete, they will go where I have decided they will go. That is the whole of the outcome, and the cost of it was the last illusion I held about what my son thought of me before that folder. I am not sure what to call that trade. I am not sure it was a trade at all, not something I chose so much as something I discovered, a thing that was true before November and simply became visible in November, and the discovery of a truth is not a loss exactly. It is a fact you did not have before, but facts when they concern your child have weight. I still set out 4 cups when I know they are coming. I set them out every single time, 4 cups and the good tea and whatever I have made that week, and I wait for the bell, and I open the door, and I let in whoever is there, and I am genuinely glad when they arrive. That has not changed, and I do not believe it will. Some things you build over decades, and they hold even when other things don't. And what I have built over the years, and over the work, and over the specific, careful months after I understood what was coming, what I have built is a set of documents that say exactly what I intend them to say, that name exactly what I intend them to name, that describe exactly the present reality, and not an assumed one. You can put a paper in front of someone and call it what you like. You can call it tidying up. You can call it clarity. You can call it being prepared, or being practical, or being thoughtful about the future. You can draft it carefully and have a good attorney review it and bring it to a dinner table in a leather tote with brass feet. You can slide it across a white oak table with a heavy silver pen and watch the person on the other side of the table pick up the pen and sign her name. She will sign it willingly. She will sign it completely, in her full name, the name she has used on contracts since 1981. And it will describe exactly nothing. That is the whole of what they learned. That is the whole of what I wanted them to know. Sign whatever they put in front of you. Once you have made sure it reaches nothing, I have made sure